Introduction. In an era where global communication and mass media have dramatically increased the interconnectedness of societies, the term anti-culture has gained prominence as an ideological concept. While it does not always refer to a specific movement or set of beliefs, the idea of anti-culture is increasingly becoming a way of critiquing mainstream values, institutions, and norms. In many cases, anti-culture is employed as a reaction to perceived social, political, or cultural injustices or shortcomings. It embodies a rejection of conventional cultural ideals, often emphasizing a return to authenticity, individuality, or subversive creativity. This exploration seeks to define anti-culture, examine its origins, trace its manifestations in various societies, and discuss its impact on modern thought. What is anti-culture? At its core, anti-culture can be understood as a broad, umbrella term that encompasses movements, attitudes, and ideologies that challenge the dominant cultural norms and values of society. It is often described as a form of dissent, rebellion, or resistance against societal structures and institutions that are considered oppressive, homogenizing, or out of touch with the lived realities of individuals. Anti-culture does not necessarily advocate for a complete destruction of culture but rather seeks to expose, critique, or disrupt the prevailing cultural narratives. The term itself can be fluid and takes on different meanings depending on the context in which it is used. It can be a reflection of dissent in the realm of politics, social structures, or cultural practices. Anti-culture can be seen as a rejection of mainstream trends, such as consumerism, conformity, and commodification of personal identity. It can also signal a deeper critique of the ways in which society structures identity, meaning, and power. The origins of anti-culture. The roots of anti-culture lie in the historical moments of cultural upheaval, social reform, and artistic movements. From the 19th century Romanticism to the countercultural movements of the 1960s, there have been numerous instances in history where artistic, philosophical, and political movements have rejected the status quo. 1. Romanticism and the rejection of rationalism. In the late 18th and early 19th centuries, the Romantic movement emerged as a reaction to the Enlightenment's emphasis on reason, science, and industrialization. Romantic thinkers such as William Blake, Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, and Lord Byron rejected the rationalist worldview that dominated European culture, instead championing emotion, intuition, and individual creativity. For the Romantics, industrialization was viewed as a force that alienated people from nature, from genuine human emotions, and from their true selves. 2. The Beat Generation. In the mid-20th century, the Beat Generation, led by writers such as Allen Ginsberg, Jack Kerouac, and William S. Burroughs, rejected the materialism and conformism of post-World War II American society. They criticized the shallowness of the American dream, opting instead for a more liberated, spontaneous lifestyle that embraced sexual freedom, drug experimentation, and anti-establishment ideas. The Beats saw mainstream culture as stifling creativity and self-expression, making their works a form of rebellion. 3. The counterculture of the 1960s. The 1960s marked a significant era of cultural transformation, with young people around the world rejecting the values of their parents' generation. This counterculture, best known for its involvement with the peace and civil rights movements, became synonymous with protests against the Vietnam War, racial segregation, and the consumer-driven society. The sexual revolution, environmentalism, and the rise of alternative lifestyles were seen as critical ways to break free from conventional societal norms. The anti-culture of the 60s was embodied by the hippie movement, which rejected the materialism and violence of mainstream society in favor of love, peace, and ecological awareness. Manifestations of anti-culture. 1. Anti-consumerism. One of the most prominent aspects of anti-culture is the rejection of consumerism, which is often seen as the driving force behind societal alienation, environmental destruction, and the commodification of human experiences. Anti-culture critiques the pervasive influence of corporate interests in shaping individual desires and societal expectations. Consumerism, in the view of anti-culture advocates, reduces people to mere consumers, focusing their identities around their ability to purchase and possess rather than on their intellectual, emotional, or spiritual growth. Anti-consumerism often leads to a return to simpler ways of life, such as minimalism, localism, or a rejection of mass production in favor of artisanal or sustainable goods. Many proponents of anti-consumerism also align themselves with social movements advocating for environmental sustainability, fair trade, and ethical labor practices, all of which stand in contrast to the exploitative nature of global capitalism. 2. Anti-mainstream media. Another key manifestation of anti-culture is the criticism and rejection of mainstream media. For many, the mainstream media is seen as an instrument of social control that serves corporate interests and reinforces dominant power structures. Anti-culture thinkers argue that mainstream media perpetuates a homogenized, superficial understanding of culture and reality, often manipulating public opinion and obscuring the truth. The rise of independent media, alternative press, and online platforms has provided a space for anti-culture voices to challenge the narratives put forth by mainstream news outlets. Social media, in particular, has allowed for the democratization of information, offering a platform for marginalized voices and movements that would otherwise be excluded from the dominant media discourse. 3. Anti-institutionalism. Anti-culture also manifests in a rejection of traditional institutions, such as religion, the state, and educational systems. In many cases, these institutions are seen as upholding systems of control, oppression, and conformity. Anti-institutionalism argues that these structures limit individual freedom and creativity by imposing rigid rules, norms, and expectations. Religious institutions, in particular, are often viewed by anti-culture advocates as tools of repression, suppressing individual spirituality in favor of organized dogma. Similarly, the state is critiqued for its role in perpetuating social inequalities and enforcing laws that limit personal autonomy. Educational institutions, while often seen as a means of enlightenment, are criticized for their role in training individuals to conform to societal norms rather than fostering critical thinking and innovation. 4. Art and aesthetics of anti-culture. The artistic expressions associated with anti-culture are diverse but share a common thread. They often aim to shock, provoke, or disorient the audience in order to challenge conventional notions of beauty, morality, and identity. The Dada movement, which emerged during World War I, is one of the earliest examples of an art form that deliberately rejected traditional aesthetic values in favor of absurdity, chaos, and subversion. In more contemporary times, artists like Banksy have used street art to critique social and political structures, often through satirical, anti-authoritarian messages. Similarly, the punk rock movement of the 1970s and 1980s utilized music, fashion, and visual art to resist mainstream cultural standards, advocating for anti-establishment views and individual freedom. The impact of anti-culture. Anti-culture plays a crucial role in challenging the status quo and encouraging critical examination of dominant societal structures. By pushing against norms and institutions, anti-culture fosters creativity, individual autonomy, and social change. It acts as a counterpoint to the often overwhelming force of mainstream culture, providing space for alternative perspectives and dissenting voices. At the same time, anti-culture can be a double-edged sword. While it has undoubtedly contributed to progress in areas such as civil rights, environmentalism, and personal freedom, its critique of conventional values can also lead to a sense of alienation and fragmentation within society. The rejection of institutions and structures, while important for innovation, can also lead to a loss of social cohesion and a breakdown in the shared values that bind communities together. Conclusion. Anti-culture, as a concept and movement, embodies a powerful form of resistance and critique. It encourages individuals and groups to question the cultural, political, and economic forces that shape their lives, urging them to seek alternative ways of living, thinking, and being. From anti-consumerism and the rejection of mainstream media to critiques of institutions and artistic expression, anti-culture represents a vital part of the ongoing dialogue about the future of society and the role of individuals within it. In a world that is increasingly defined by mass consumerism, social conformity, and institutional control, anti-culture offers a necessary corrective, reminding us of the importance of diversity, freedom, and critical thought. Whether through art, philosophy, or activism, anti-culture continues to serve as a counterbalance to the forces of homogenization, inspiring individuals and communities to strive for greater authenticity, creativity, and social justice.